time thing is you have to win.
There you go. There you go. That's what I'm talking about. Hey, Mark, settle down a little bit.
All right, welcome back to the Just Win podcast. It's exciting times right now. That's Tashan Reed. That's Vic Tafur. I'm Ted Nguyen, and we just wrapped up the first round of the NFL draft, and the Raiders picked Ashton Jeanty. We had tons of discussion whether it'd be worth it to pick a running back with that sixth pick, or do they go and do the team building thing, as Spytech referred to it as, and build through the trenches. And he made his fantasy football decision. His son wanted him to make that fantasy football decision, and he pulled the trigger on Ashton Jeanty. And I mean, even if you wanted somebody else, you can't be mad at picking the best player available and one of the handful of elite players or prospects in this draft. So they got Ashton Jeanty. What are your initial reactions?
Go first, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big, kind of question mark was what the Jaguars are going to do. They ended up being the team that really sort of dictated the draft after the Titans went with Cam Ward with the first pick. We had some discussion about, what the Jaguars kind of shock everybody and take Jeanty at number 5, but they shocked everybody even more. They had a trade in place to move up to number 2 and land Travis Hunter, and our Mike Silver over at The Athletic, he was in the Jaguars war room, and they had 2 guys, I believe he said, that were graded as sort of like their top tier guys. And Travis Hunter was one, and the other one was Ashton Jeanty. And so, the Jaguars worked out that trade a couple of weeks ago, but it sounds like if that trade didn't happen, then the Jaguars were probably going to take Jeanty at 5. So for the Raiders' sake, this is a good thing that trade got done. The Browns ended up taking Mason Graham at number 5, and that cleared the way for, I think, Jeanty to pretty clearly be the best player available for them at 6. It just so happened to work out that he also fills a need for the Raiders. And I know there's some debate about positional value, but I think Spytech and Carroll made it pretty clear that they value the running back position. And, they weren't going to take a player that they had graded much lower just because he played, what's perceived to be, a more premium position.
I think it's a fun pick. I think if you watch the highlights, use your imagination, this could be one of the top guys in the league for a long time to come. I think that's what happened with Pete and John Spytek. They fell in love with his film. When they met him, they liked the guy just as much off the field. They liked his competitiveness, his character. It was a leadership back in Boise. So I think just the total package. And they thought, it is a very deep running back class. There was, maybe, people who are like love analytics and would say, hey, pick somebody else in this round and get a running back in round 2 or 3 and kind of take advantage of that value. But I think they loved the tape too much. And they also thought that, there's no guarantee the guy we'd want in round 2 is going to be there. Like, it might be gone by 37. So, you really can't tell for sure what's going to happen. So I said, let's just get the guy we like. And he was like one of the very top guys on their board and, best player available, top running back. And he can do it all. 3 down back. We talked about how he can break tackles, go a distance, he can catch. Ian Pete Carroll today talked about his pass pro is not bad. Definitely would need some seasoning, but it's definitely some good material to work with. So they love the guy. They love the running back. They're excited about what he brings to the offense. So I get if you really want to haggle and say they should have done something different, but when you love the film and the guy's a dynamic, possibly generational player, you take him.
Yeah, he just has a rare combination of contact balance, power, be able to make you miss in a phone booth, and he has long speed. Like, you don't usually get all those things in one back, and he has all those things, which is why he is a generational type of running back prospect. And also, when you're picking a running back high, you want to see him have the ability to impact the passing game. And Jeanty didn't really get a lot of opportunities last season because they were so intent on getting him that rushing record. But the year before that, they used him a lot as a receiver, and he's really smooth. He was a former slot receiver. He caught everything. I didn't see one drop from him. Every time they threw him the ball, he caught a one-hander. So that ability to be a impact as a receiver also makes you more of a modern weapon. And makes you feel better about drafting him 6th overall. So I think, that part of his game hasn't been fully unlocked yet. So we'll see what Chip Kelly does as far as utilizing him as a receiver downfield.
Yeah, and I think Genty, when he spoke to us briefly, he did highlight his pass protection as one area where he does think he needs to improve. And you know, I think Carroll said he thought his technique was pretty good, but it's really just about being consistent. And obviously, there's also a huge gap between the level of defenders he was going against from that standpoint and NFL, defensive linemen and linebackers. And so, in order to be that really complete three down back, that's going to be an area where he's going to have to be pretty strong in. And but as a rookie, he's going to have things that he has to continue to develop, and maybe that's where somebody like Raheem Mostert comes in and more of that third down back role as a guy who has a stronger skill set in that area. So it's not going to be all on him. I don't think we're going to see him getting 27 carries a game or whatever crazy number he had with Boise State that last year. But he is going to get a ton of touches, like you said, Ted, not just as a runner, but also as a receiver.
Yeah, and that's another, I guess, drawback that some people had with Genty is just the amount of carries that he got at Boise. They put a ton on him, and they just kept on running him, trying to get that record. So yeah, like you said, I wouldn't be surprised if Mostert was in a mix, and we saw some promise from McCormick. So he, even though he can be a bell cow back for you, he is a little bit on the smaller side as far as just height and weight. So I don't know if you want to give him 30 carries right off the bat just yet. But with Chip Kelly, I trust that he's going to find ways to get him the ball and not just in compact spaces. And one of the reasons why running backs have been able to last a little bit longer in this era of football is because they're not getting those 25 carries per game and just getting pounded as well. So it's good that the Raiders do have Mostert and maybe McCormick or one of the young guys step up and be able to take some of that load off of Genty as well.
I guess the next question is this O-line good enough to kind of help him be all it can be? And I think, again, tonight, Spytek and Carroll said that they like this group. They kind of are confident in the young guys they have. Maybe DJ Glaze does get a chance to be the right tackle, or maybe they draft one tomorrow or maybe in round 4. But as of right now, they seem like confident that these guys can make it work across the board. Alex Kaplan, and got a bunch of young guys around him. So Colton Miller, we talked about him. He wants a new contract, but he's still here for one more year at least. And so I think to me, if that group can kind of gel and take another step up, then maybe this offense can be halfway decent, if not pretty good.
Yeah, I got to see it. I think I got to see it from this offensive line. That just, last couple of years, really, they haven't been really an effective run blocking or pass blocking unit, and they didn't really add anything outside of Kappa. So, I mean, obviously you can develop guys, and Jackson Powers Johnson and DJ Glaze could take year 2 leaps, and Colton Miller perhaps could have a better year now that he's fully over that shoulder injury. So I'm not saying it can't be better, but I still think that's a unit where I'd like to see them add before the end of the draft. And but another factor that could be playing into it is, I think as much as the run game struggled the last couple of years because of the offensive line not blocking well, I think it also teams just really had no reason to respect the pass game. And I think that's changed now with Geno Smith being the type of quarterback that he is, having the arm that he does and the ability to attack all 3 levels of the field. He's got a number 1 option in Brock Bowers, and Jacoby Myers is a solid number 2 receiver, but I think they also need to add some more help at receiver as well to keep the offense more balanced. So I think they have a nice, kind of the outlining of a foundation going on offense, but offensive line and then receiver, I think are still 2 spots that they're probably going to have to make some upgrades at in order for this offense to really come together how they wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely promise. DJ Glaze had a promising rookie season. Jackson Powers Johnson, I really think he's going to be a star. But again, you're talking about offensive line that was mostly 32nd in rushing success rate almost all of last season, and kind of got it boosted his way to 31st like in the last second. So you're talking about a line that was one of the worst run blocking lines in football, and hoping that a second-year leap from some of these players will get them maybe middle of the pack. If they're a middle pack run blocking unit, but we have a superstar running back, maybe he could boost you up into somewhere in that 10-12 range of running game as far as efficiency and explosiveness. But yeah, I mean, I guess Pete Carroll came in and looked at this offensive line and said, I think these guys are going to take a leap. I think our scheme is going to do this line a lot of favors. And like you mentioned, Geno Smith being able to get that ace defender out of the box, maybe he can do that. And yeah, we'll see. As far and we'll talk about some round 2 guys available. But I mean, to me, I think I would have been willing to move off of DJ Glaze if you got a top prospect at tackle like Membu. I know the team really liked Banks as well. But now in the second round with the guys that are left, I don't know if you can really upgrade from Glaze. So I think he's pretty much penciled in as your starter. I mean, obviously there could be a surprise guy or a gem there. But to me, it seems like Glaze is your guy moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of the more sure answer guys. No, I mean, obviously there's no sure answer, but kind of the more intriguing tackle prospects like Josh Simmons and Josh Connerly. A couple of those guys went off the board at the end of the first round. That I think would have been more upgrades. Even Donovan Jackson, the offensive lineman out of Ohio State, who kind of was a guard tackle hybrid. I think the rest of the guys, as you're kind of insinuating, are more so projects. I don't think that stops them from potentially adding one.
My guy Ursu, he's still available. I think, from Minnesota.
Yeah. I think he's he's a little raw. Like he could compete from year one, I think, but he'd also be making a position changes. I think he was with a left tackle, right?
Right.
He was a left tackle.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it might be a little cleaner outlook at a few other positions. We'll see how the top of the second round goes. I think it could be potentially maybe around some quarterbacks. Also, it seems like John Spicek thinks there's a potential for some trades, also for the Raiders maybe to move down from 37. So, kind of have to see how the board plays out. But, I definitely don't think they, just given everything that they're saying about the offensive line, unless they're blowing smoke up prices, I don't think they feel like they have to get, a starting caliber tackle in the second round necessarily.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about some other second round options. Shadir Sanders is still available. And yeah, I mean, to me, he was always a guy that had a second round grade. And I know Pittsburgh was talking about potentially drafting him, but they ended up going with the Oregon defensive lineman instead of drafting him. So he fell all the way to the second round. The Giants took Jackson Dart, who has a higher ceiling. To me, I just don't think if you don't have the conviction to draft Sanders in the first round, and you have a team full of holes that you still need to address, I just don't think he's an option in the second round, or at least it wouldn't make sense to me. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a pretty huge gap between 6 and 37, like, in terms of like your willingness to take a guy. It kind of depends how the board plays out. Like, I don't know if he's going to be there at 37, just given with some of the teams that are ahead of them, like the Cleveland Browns and maybe some other teams that could get involved there. But if he is, I think they'll probably still think about it at that point. We've talked about it with Geno, being in his mid-30s and them having a desire for sort of that developmental type of quarterback. I think it could make sense. I still don't think it's particularly likely when you compare it to some of the other positions. And there's also a few other quarterbacks that maybe could hang around to the third round. We'll see what happens with guys like Jalen Milroe or Quinn Ewers or, Will Howard, Tyler Shuck, so there may be a guy who fits into that developmental role that maybe isn't as polished as Sanders, but, could be a high-end backup, low-end starter type of guy that you could get in the third round or the fourth round. So, we'll see how the board plays out, but there's some other guys I think at positions that are more immediate needs that stands out. I think Luther Burden, receiver out of Missouri, is probably the best receiver available right now. He does kind of have a little bit of like a samey skill set as like a Jacoby Myers, like they're like slot Z guys. So maybe that's a little redundant, but Jacoby is going into the final year of his deal, so maybe that doesn't matter. I think Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State, he's more of that bigger body type of prototypical X receiver. He's still around. Jalen Noel is another guy who was his teammate at Iowa State, who's kind of in that range. So there's some interesting receivers. I think cornerbacks, Will Johnson kind of was a surprise guy that fell, Michigan cornerback, but I think there was a report from Rappaport or Schefter that he had like a knee issue, and that might be why he fell a little bit. Trey Amos out of Mississippi is another cornerback prospect. Thomas out of Florida State. There's that small school kid that had a bad knee injury last year, who's probably fell for similar reasons. I think Chevelle's his name. So there's a few guys at spots that the Raiders could use help at that are going to be out there. So I really think it's going to be a true best player available approach, like they've been saying.
I wasn't a big fan of Will Johnson as like a half the first round guy, but I love him in round 2. I think he's like this. I mean, he's got a lot of upside. He had some rough tape here and there, but he's big, lanky, the kind of guy that Pete Carroll likes and can develop and has in the past. I think he's got good ball skills. I think there's a lot there to really I think to excite Carroll. So I don't know how bad the knee injury is, or I mean, I'm sure it's a little concerning if he dropped this much, but at 37, to me, that's great value for a guy who could be possibly a number 1 cornerback for you before long. So that's a guy I think is really interesting in the second round. The quarterbacks, I think, the Shedeur Sanders, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about, obviously the interviews did not go well with teams around the league. That's why he's dropping. And I think that's going to be a Tom Brady call. If Tom Brady knows him really well, they've trained together. The NIL deal he had for him in college. So if Tom Brady vouches for him, I'm sure that goes a long way. And maybe that would be worth considering at 37. If he doesn't, and you want to wait and see, like Tashan said, which guys might be there in round 3, that'd be the way you go. But I think, again, it's some very fascinating guys in round 2. And you can see, like this draft, everyone said there weren't that many elite guys. But once you got to rounds 2 and 3, there are a lot of good players. There are other guys with upside potential, and they have some chinks in the armor, but still, there's guys that can be probably starters for you, in the short term. So I think there are some exciting options tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, with the Sanders thing, like, if you thought he was going to be a really good quarterback, you would draft him 6 overall instead of a running back. If you believe that.
I don't think so, because you got Gino locked up for 2 years. Pretty much, you're paying him a lot of money for 2 years. That's Pete Carroll's guy. And we're not going to have someone come in, I don't think, year 1 and kind of make it uncomfortable, like the thing with Cousins and Penix last year. So I think a much, whether it's Sanders or Milroe or Ewers, I think it makes sense to have someone come in and just sit for a year or 2. And Tom Brady's been a very vocal guy about he thinks guys should sit and learn for a while. I think that's the best way to develop quarterbacks. So I think, you can get a guy at 37 or in round 3 and really have him sit, watch and learn for a couple of years. And ideally, in 2 years, you can decide what Gino does. And do you want to keep going with Gino, or do you want to just give it to the young guy and hopefully it's not a huge rough patch in between?
Yeah. Like I also think I don't know. I think everybody's kind of gotten to this world of like hunting for like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, and like it's cool to have like a good quarterback. You know what I mean? Like it's like you can win with like a 10 to 15 range guy. Like that's what Geno Smith is, And I think he was probably a guy that coming out of college in retrospect, he probably shouldn't have played right away. Like it didn't seem like he was quite ready yet at that point in his career. And I know there was a bunch of other shit that was wrong with the New York Jets at the time that led to him getting off to that rough start, but. Like that's fine. That's a cool outcome. And I think with Geno, I forget what exact pick he was, but he was a 2nd round pick as well. So I just, I don't really get into like the firm, blanket things, but we'll see. I think there's some other positions that like make sense. I think a position is probably one of the thinner ones that is a big need for the Raiders is linebacker. Like I don't think there's that many top flight linebackers in this class. We saw Jahai Campbell go off the board late to the Eagles somehow. Like they still just keep getting these guys that are steals. It doesn't really,
man. It's crazy.
But Carson Swearinger out of UCLA is probably the consensus like 2nd best linebacker in the class, and he's a guy that's been linked to the Raiders. They had him on the top 30 visit. He's kind of most people consider him to be like a top 40 player. Maybe he's there at 37. Is another guy that makes sense. And Vic, I know you talked a lot about, nickelback is a big need for the Raiders. I think the safety out of South Carolina, Emma, I think is how you pronounce his last name, but he kind of lined up all over the place, safety, box safety, nickelback. He'd probably play nickelback, I would guess, year 1 for the Raiders. Like maybe that could be a guy. He kind of fits that Pete Carroll mold of defensive back that he likes. So, I mean, there should be a collection of guys sitting there at 37, and I think that's probably why Spytech mentioned today the idea of potentially trading back. I don't know if they're going to trade back 15 spots, but you can trade back 3 or 4 spots, maybe for a team that is trying to move up to get a quarterback or something of that nature. Maybe it can make sense for the Raiders, and they can still have a player sitting there when they move back. That's worth taking.
That's interesting. So our team's talking about moving Imawari to nickel, the safety.
I don't know. I don't know that like teams would do that full time. Like he did line up at nickel at South Carolina. I know that he was kind of one of those players, kind of similar to like Jeremy Chin, like how he was used last year, where they kind of lined him up everywhere. I don't know if full time nickel is something that he's really trying to do, but I would imagine that would be what the Raiders would do, just because it doesn't really like with how their defense is structured. I don't think it would make sense otherwise.
I don't know if he's a
Yeah.
round 2 or round 3 guy, but I love that guy from Kansas State, Jacob Parrish, that slot corner. I think he's a big time player.
Mm.
I think he can be an impact guy for you. So I'm not sure where he fits in that range, but there are some guys, like I said, at positions of need that can make an impact. I think it's tomorrow. So I think it's a key day for these Raiders as far as trying to get this roster back up to be competitive with the rest of the division. It's such a tough division, and it keeps getting better.
Yeah. I mean, to me, I'm just looking at the corners because corner and linebacker are obviously huge needs for the Raiders. But I think in the modern NFL, you can survive with a thin linebacker core, but it's hard to survive without really good corners. And Trey Amos, guy with long arms, fits what Pete Carroll would look for in a corner. And now that you mentioned Iman Wari possible move to nickel, I kind of really like that because I watch this tape, and as a safety, I don't really love the instincts at times. I don't love the angles he takes. There's some really bad plays, but his best plays are plays in coverage. I mean, this guy's a freak athlete. He tested like a freak athlete, but his best plays are when he's playing man-to-man coverage. I mean, the tapes I saw, he didn't get beat once when he was playing coverage. And as a nickel, I think that'd be pretty interesting, especially in a system like this one. So some teams have, I know some teams had a top 15 grade on him. So it's interesting to see him fall this far. I mean, like I said, his tape isn't totally clean. There's a lot of splash plays and a lot of kind of misassignments as well. But if you move the nickel, I think some of those worries go out the window. So that's kind of interesting. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, like body type wise and athleticism and speed, like he seems like everything Pete Carroll would like in a defensive back. So it would make a lot of sense to me. I don't know why he's fallen this far. Like you said, I know he kind of surged up the draft boards or mock drafts when he had that stellar combine where he ran like a 4.3 or whatever. So I don't know what the secret story is there. But another position that's kind of interest that's not necessarily a need or isn't a need, I would say, is defensive end. Like there's a few interesting defensive end talents still on the board. Mike Green out of Marshall. I know he's had some off the field stuff in his past, and maybe that's why he's still available. The Boston College defensive end, Donovan, cannot pronounce his last name. He's still around. So there's a couple of intriguing defensive ends as well. So yeah, I mean, it's I don't want to say they can't go wrong, because obviously you always can, but it seemed like there should be a lot of quality players sitting there at 37 for them. So I think this is shaping up pretty well for the Raiders, to be honest. I know that running back is a position that not everybody feels like should be, you should use a top 6 pick on, but between the second and third round, like the Raiders, the opportunity should be there to get 2 more starters on day 2, and that has to be the goal, because we talked about it. I mean, in terms of glaring needs, receiver, linebacker, cornerback / nickelback, you need more offensive line help. You probably need more defensive line help, especially on the interior, maybe with Christian Wilkins taking a little bit longer to get back from that foot injury. So they need a little bit of everything, and they want a developmental quarterback. So, I mean, they got to hit, you know what I mean? So day 1 went well, but we'll see how day 2 goes.
Yeah, and I think it is good news for the Raiders that only 2 running backs were taken in the first round, because I think there's going to be some teams that would want to move up in the second round to get Henderson, Judkins. With Sanders still there, maybe a team wants to trade up and get him, which means that more players would fall to the Raiders slot. So I think that's a good thing. All right. Any more reactions? Any more guys we should look for in round 2 before we move on to questions?
Let me see. Scrolling through this.
Anybody else?
Yeah, that was probably about it. There's some names we didn't mention, but those were the main, position groups. So Yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's transition to questions.
All right. First question we have from Space Beast, who donated $2. If you want your questions to take priority, you could always donate. Do you know if Brady was in a war room?
No, he was not. Someone said he was still in Coachella, but I don't know if that's true or not. Don't start spreading that. But yeah, he was not there. I think I'm sure he was in close contact. I hear he and Pete talk daily, so I think he's definitely in the mix.
Yeah, man. So must already knew who they were picking, obviously.
All right, we need some more questions, guys. All right, dude, this is amazing. He's generational. He has no other running back in his class.
I don't think that
Oh,
was a question.
sorry, not a question.
Just saying he loves to pick, man.
Do you think Burden falls to 37?
I need to look at the draft order. I have not done that since the end of the draft. Let's see here. All right, so we got the Browns at 33, Texans at 34, Titans at 35, Browns again at 36. The Browns really need a receiver, I feel like, especially seeing Travis Hunter. So with them picking twice, it seems a little dicey.
And plus, you'd have teams trade up. I think Burton was a guy who thought of as a first-round guy, so I could definitely see teams trading up for him. And so, I mean, it just depends. Like, I'm sure there's a handful of guys who teams have circled. This guy's, hey, this guy's still available. I think he's one of them. So it should be some trades tomorrow, I would think, in the first 5 picks, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think if he does, I think it'd be a good pick. I know I mentioned he has some kind of redundancy with Myers, but Myers is getting closer to 30 and going to the last year of his deal, and I think you can put Myers in the slot and Burden at the Z or vice versa, and I think that's fine. They need starting caliber receivers, so I don't think they can get too picky about alignment when it comes to guys.
All right. Next question, Bubba donated $2. Is cornerback top priority in the second, or will they go BPA? I mean, for me, I think it's probably the position you look at first because I just think they have a desperate need at corner. It's a very thin room. I'm blanking on a corner from Green Bay that they signed. What's the name?
Eric Stokes.
Yeah, Eric Stokes. I know they got him penciled in as a corner, but I'm not totally convinced that he should just be your starting corner and you should be happy with that. So I think nickel and outside corner are both positions of need, in my opinion. You need another guy to compete in there with Stokes.
Yeah, I think slot corner is a huge need. So I don't know if that's round 2 or round 3, or you can't wait too long because there aren't that many guys that can come in and play right away. So I think it's definitely that's a priority tomorrow. I'd say in round 2 or 3 to get ideally a slot cornerback, but definitely a cornerback in general.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like I said, I don't think they're going to force it necessarily, but it could be very well possible, that the best player available does just end up being a cornerback. Like if it's Will Johnson, if he falls to 37, for example, I think that'd be a pretty strong pick. Which got a question here and kind of already answered it, but yeah, I think like that would be fine. And nickelback, I guess, is probably more of a pressing need than outside cornerback. Like I think they have more guys in the mix at outside than nickelback, but I don't think they'll that stop them from adding another outside guy.
Yeah, and this kind of falls on the question: do you think Will Johnson would be a good pick at 37? I mean, I think the reason why Johnson has fallen this far is because he's probably off of some teams' boards. That knee injury is probably bad enough to scare some teams off of him completely. I mean, obviously, if you have faith that he can be healthy, then he'll be a fantastic pick at 37, fantastic value. But we don't know how bad that knee injury is, and obviously, it's bad enough to scare some teams to pick him in the first round completely.
Also, I'll say one of the knocks on him, before this was he is injury prone. He had problems throughout his college career getting on the field and being there for, being a reliable guy. So that's definitely, if it was a small red flag, 2 weeks ago, now it's a huge one. So I think you have to worry about getting a guy who can't stay on the field.
All right, my 2 cents asks, now that running back has been secured, how do the Raiders address offensive line to ensure Genty can thrive? That's tough because I think what 7 was there 8 offensive linemen drafted in the first round, and this is not even considered to be a very. I mean, it's considered a deeper running offensive line class, but not one with ton of high ceiling type of offensive linemen. And even with that, 8 guys went in the first round because there's a huge drop off when you get into the second and third round. So now you're looking at guys that are more of project players and might not be ready to play right away or have to make position switches. I know Vic mentioned Irsary. How do you say his last name?
That's right.
Yeah, from Minnesota, who played left tackle, but he's a guy that needs a lot of developmental work. I mean, to me, if you were going to upgrade that position, you should have done it in the first round. I think DJ Glaze is probably a better bet to play right tackle than the guys that are available right now. So you got to coach you guys up.
Yeah, I think guard is another spot. Probably the best guard is the Georgia guard, Tate Redledge, I think is how you pronounce his name. Big ass guy. I think he's like 6'7", 300 pounds. Kind of that mauler type. He's had some injuries in his college career. That's probably why he's still hanging around. But I don't think there's anything wrong with adding to the interior either. We've talked about it. Like, I don't think you can bank on Kappa being a sure thing at this point in his career. And, it kind of depends how you feel about Meredith and Parham. But I don't think adding an interior offensive line will be a bad bet either. It might be a little bit early for 37. Maybe that's more of a trade down situation. But maybe guard could be another spot where they add to the offensive line.
All right, next question. Do you think Colton Miller is a zone blocking scheme fit? Should we trade Miller and get some draft capital before he's a free agent? Thanks. I mean, Colton Miller is a zone blocking guy. The Raiders actually have better zone blockers on the offensive line than gap blockers. It's just they were so discombobulated and they couldn't get their assignments right that they went to gap scheme because it's just a little bit easier to block than playing zone where you have to be in sync together. Colton Miller's a light guy and he has great feet. He completely belongs in a zone blocking scheme. And Chip Kelly his scheme has evolved a lot. I mean, in the playoffs last year, the college playoffs, he switched that scheme into a gap blocking scheme because they have so many injuries on the offensive line. And obviously it paid dividends. So I think he's going to do what's best for this group of offensive linemen. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Raiders were more of a zone scheme. Obviously it'll do a little bit of everything. And I don't think you should trade Colton Miller because I just think he's such a solid player. He's been such a solid player for you. He's been underpaid. You just pay him. You're not going to find a better replacement at this point.
Yeah, I mean, at this point in the draft, it's kind of tough. Like, I don't know who you're going to draft to replace him,
Yeah, it's a good night for Colton, for sure. Colton definitely is happy tonight. I think he got some leverage back. I think he clearly is going to be their best option right out left tackle. I don't know how you say pay him. I mean, I wouldn't give him a blank check for like 5 years, but I definitely would try and find a reasonable middle ground where you kind of get him for a couple of years and leave yourself open to some possibilities on the road. I'm not sure. Now, Colton's good. I think last year he kind of struggled because he was hurt and took him a while to get going. But I don't know if Colton's a great left tackle at this point in his career. So I don't know if I want to lock him up for a long time. But I think we're going to find out just how much, how high they are on him in the next few months in terms of his negotiations. So I think, but clearly tonight, a good night for Colton Miller.
All right, Space Beast back in donations asking what quarterback can you see the Raiders going for? I think you guys mentioned they like Jalen Moreau. He's obviously still available. But I think if you're going to go Moreau, you're going to have to use a second or third round pick to get him. I think I'm higher on Will Howard than most draft analysts, and I think you could probably get him in the 4th, 5th round. And Chip Kelly obviously has a ton of intel on him, so I think if they end up picking Will Howard, it's because Chip Kelly thinks that he can continue to develop.
Yeah, I mean,
if they don't, that means
They don't.
I mean, Chip Kelly's like, woo-hoo.
Yeah, unless maybe they pick him
Wow.
somebody else picks him up early.
Yeah, 37. I think the only quarterback that's really in the mix is Shadur. I think they like Milrow, but he's probably more of a 68 guy for them. Like if he's still there in the third round, I think they'd be tempted to take him just because of all the potential that he has with his physical traits, and he did perform really well in meetings. Grasped the offensive system really strongly at Alabama, and understood NFL level concepts. So I think those are the two guys I would look for on day 2. In terms of the day 3 guys, like I think Quinn Ewers, you're kind of hoping maybe he falls to 108 in the 4th round there. Like if he's there, maybe they think about taking him there as more of a guy with the traits. But I feel like after that, it's kind of just like guys that like this guy is most likely going to be like a backup. It's like we're basically drafting like Aiden O'Connell, pretty much. So if they do trade Aiden O'Connell, which is a possibility, maybe that's where like a Will Howard comes in the 4th or 5th round, or
See,
the guys that are kind of in that bucket.
I could see Ewers tomorrow. I could see you. I don't know about round 2, but definitely I could see him in round 3. I think we've talked about the Steve Sarkisian connection with Pete Carroll. I mean, Almost came through tonight with that, gotten Kelvin Banks if Genty wasn't there. So I think there's occasion raised about him in a pro style offense and reading the progressions, reading teams, reading defenses. I think there's the excuse that he had last year that he was hurt, which I don't know how valid it is. I mean, I'm sure he was hurt, but how much did it affect his play? That's something I'm sure Sarkisian's talked to Pete about. So I think it's a wild card, which I'm not sure it's going to be there around 4. It may be, but I think if you want him, and I think that there's not a lot of guys left at this point. Yeah, I think he goes tomorrow night. So yeah, I think for me that's a guy that might surprise you.
Yeah, I'd let somebody else do that. I wouldn't do it personally. 68 would be a little too rich for me.
I got Ewers way down on my board. He is really low. But I mean, maybe it's because of the injuries or whatnot. But why does Steve Sarkisian have such a hold on the Raiders? Like they were so
I know that he
interested.
does. Does he?
Theoretically, he might.
3rd round.
We'll see, man. Just
Others.
you're looking for diamonds in the rough, right? That's when you're looking for and maybe he is one. Who knows? I'm not a huge fan of his film, but then again, I can't believe that Jackson Dart went in the 1st round. When I watch his film, I think it's I don't see it, but what do I know? But yeah, I mean, the answer. I guess the question was about the quarterbacks. I think there's a pretty good chance to get one tomorrow, right around 2 or 3.
All right. Joaquin Ruiz, $5 donation. Very generous. Asks, favorite possible late round steals for the Raiders? I said it before, but I really like Teddy Buchanan.
Yeah.
I think he'd come in and compete for a starting Raiders linebacker spot, and you could probably get him 5th round or later, maybe.
Yeah, my guy's Billy Bowman out of Oklahoma. I don't know if he's going to make it to the 4th round, but if he does, I'd be pretty eager to take him. I think he's another guy that played a lot of safety, but he spent more time at nickelback at Oklahoma. I think he started there for a full season earlier on in his career. I think he could be a starter immediately at nickelback, kind of a day 3 steal. And then a couple receivers, I don't know if they're going to be there. Like the first one, I'm not sure if he's going to be there. Savon Williams from TCU. He's kind of like a jack of all trades kind of guy, outside receiver, but he also did a lot of work in the backfield, so kind of could get creative in how you use him. And then super late, late maybe 6th round guy, Yaya Black, the defensive tackle out of Iowa. He's kind of has a body type that the Raiders just don't have. 6'6", 330 pounder. We mentioned defensive tackle briefly, but not re-signing John Jenkins. They don't really have a nose tackle right now. I think probably Fotu is probably or Foku, I forget which one it is, but I think he might be like the only one on the roster currently that kind of has that body type. So maybe we could add some help there.
You know what body type they don't have? They don't have anybody who's 460 pounds. Like my guy, Desmond Watson, the tush push Terminator. Woo!
Okay.
Round 6, man. Get that guy. Tell it, let's go. But
in the 7th round, why not? Right? Why not draft the 460 pounders with your 7th round pick?
I think you had to carry a fullback, man. You could get some fun with him. Have some fun, man. Let's get but who else? And what's my quarterback's name? The guy from South Dakota that I had in our mock draft. Obviously, I'm not a huge fan. I don't know his freaking name.
I can't remember his fucking name either.
But that guy, get that guy in round 7.
What do you see in this guy from South Dakota, Vic? What do you see?
He runs. He's like a hybrid. He can run a little bit. He can pass a little bit. He's like he can fit well with Chip Kelly offense. He's got poise. Yeah, it's a 7th round steal, whatever his name is.
Okay. That was very convincing. Oh, man.
It's late, man.
Oh, man.
Beverage.
All right. Last question. I think it's kind of important, but what do you guys think about where Christian Wilkins is as far as his health? I know there was a report out there that said the Raiders were very concerned about him, but I don't know how much credence I would put into that. He was a participant in voluntary workouts. Saw him doing squats. Saw him on a field. So,
I don't.
You saw him doing squats. He's fine. He's good.
Hey, you're not squatting on a broken foot, are you?
I mean, I think good. Tashan, you go first.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if very concerned is really accurate. I think there's some like caution with like how they're ramping him back up, which 300-pound guy coming off a broken foot, like, yeah, you're going to be cautious. But I think, early in his offseason, he was back in the boot, which he had gotten out of by the end of last season. So there was a little bit, some sort of a setback there, but now he's back out of the boot. My expectation is he's not really going to be ramping it up like that until they get to training camp, which I think is fine. Like, he's a veteran. He knows the system. He's familiar with Patrick Graham. I don't think it's as integral to have him out there for all those reps and OTAs as maybe, a rookie would be, obviously. So I think now if we get around to training camp and it's still a lingering thing, then you can start saying concern. But right now, I think it's just more of a precautionary thing than anything.
Yeah, I'd say I wouldn't use the word concern. I would say there's question marks. The Raiders are a little curious about why he's not further along, if there was a setback, why he was in the boot last month. And think about the pictures people are seeing online, like, oh, he looks fine. Again, these are photos by the Raiders website people, and it's a very controlled atmosphere. So we have no idea what he's doing in his workouts. No one's there besides Raiders employees. So I wouldn't say, oh, look at that picture. He's not wearing a boot. He's great. I mean, who the hell knows? So I think, but I have heard there's question marks. I think there's concern might be a little strong, but, it's not ideal the guy's back in a boot last month. I think people are kind of wondering what the timeline's going to be, like if it's training camp or, ideally it is. But so I think it's kind of a wait and see right now.
Yeah. All right, well, I mean, yeah, I guess if they were really concerned, maybe Mason Graham gets this pick early on. But
I mean,
he wasn't there.
If they pick a D tackle at 37,
wasn't there.
They pick a D tackle at 37. I'm like, oh, okay, that answers our question a little bit. So, but at this point, I don't think they will. But you never know. They're not really telling us what Wilkins' status is right now. But I'm sure we'll ask him before the draft is up. But I don't think their answer is going to be very forthcoming.
Not too
All
much.
right. Well, that's all we have for you for the first round today. Are we planning to come back in the later rounds?
Probably after the draft at this point.
I think after
probably wait till it all wraps up. So sometime early next week, most likely.
Yeah, Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah, that should work.
That sounds peachy keen.
Sounds good.
Peachy
All right, we'll
keen.
talk to you guys later.
Fucking say
Ashton
peachy
Dempsey,
keen.
you guys got the next LT.
Up next, the South Dakota quarterback. There's a North Dakota. I may have a school.
You don't even know what school he went to. All right.
Somewhere in Dakota. Dakota quarterback.
We're shutting this down, man. You don't even know the name of this guy. You don't have that much belief in him.
Can run a little bit, man, and get out of the pocket, make some plays. He's got poise, man. Got poise.
Anyway, bye, y'all.
All right. Thanks for joining us.
Hasta la vista, babies.